I just wanted you to know what I was going to say before I said it, so I didn't get those looks,
I'm telling Jared you're wasting content. That's what I'm doing.
So this is our ANS episode. We're going to talk about the new process and all those other things. And so being the ANS episode, you might think that we're going to talk about Attackleet as our sponsor for this episode over on onesready.com, where you can get all the equipment that you need to train for the pipeline to crush ANS and whatever it's called in the future and be selected. But that's not what I'm going to talk about, because it's also Independence Day. And there are two things that scream freedom to me: caffeine and meat. So obviously caffeine, where do you go for caffeine, Aaron?
CardoMax, got to. They have those new packets too. So I was joking around with Jared. I was like, we talked to Sean Matson over at CardoMax, and we're just like, man, we love to do. We've had him on the podcast before. We constantly talk to him, right? Because I constantly need caffeine. But we were joking around about the new packets that CardoMax put out for their energy intensifier. I'm a grape guy. It goes great in my morning smoothie. I put some, athletic greens in there. I put a little diatomaceous earth in there. And then I throw my caffeine on top of it. The new packets are fantastic. They're easier to open. They're really, really small and flat. I can get them in everywhere. So go over to CardoMax, check them out. Use our code ONESREADY at checkout. That'll get you a sweet discount. The energy intensifier, obviously, I literally drink 3 or 4. I had one before I came up here to be properly motivated through caffeine for this July 4th edition of the Ones Ready podcast. So go over to CardoMax, check out Ones Ready, or use the code ONESREADY at checkout. You can find them through our page as well over at onesready.com. And then you can get your sweet discount over there. You can energy intensifier. Maybe you wanted a little immune boost. Maybe you want a little extra hydration. Man, they got you hooked up. So go check out Sean Matson, former Navy SEAL, over at CardoMax. Use the code ONESREADY at checkout. That's CardoMax. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, don't hold the SEAL thing against him. But the second company is a former Green Beret owns the next one. And I'm such a terrible businessman that they're not even sponsors yet, but I get excited about stuff. I get excited about great companies, and I want to talk about them. And it's America Day. And if you don't head over to Anthem Snacks and grab you some of that beef jerky, all the amazing flavors, 100% American sourced, so America Day, you're doing something wrong. Head over there, bully them into talking about us a little bit more. But they have the best product that I've had in a very long time,
Absolutely.
And I'm not being hyperbolic.
Yeah, this is not it. Yeah. Full disclosure. We love those guys. We'd love to be part of that Anthem team, because you know what? Laura Sanko is actually part of that team as well. So UFC, she's a brown belt. She lives and works here in Vegas, obviously, with the UFC. The Anthem is actually the beef jerky of the UFC, in case you guys didn't know. So obviously this aligns with everything that we're doing. Laura Sanko, one of my favorite commentators, just to see what she's done, and the fact that she actually will absolutely fold your clothes while you're still wearing them. Pretty awesome. So the team over there is awesome. It represents everything that we love. So yeah, again, man, Anthem, what's up? We love you guys, man. I think it's the honey bourbon. I love the spicy one. The entire pack that I got from them was gone in 2 seconds. I think I think it's a honey bourbon one, out of this world. The pepper normal one was great, but dude, the honey bourbon I ate at the end, and I was like, oh my God, I wish I had 2 more pounds of this. But yeah, go check out Anthem. They're just good people. They're America's jerky. They partner with the UFC. They do everything the right way. It's made in the USA. They're just awesome. So shout out Anthem. Y'all are killing it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, they definitely fit in with everything else, all of our other sponsors, because I have to hide their product from my family as well.
Right.
Right.
That's how you know.
Otherwise,
that's how you do it. Yeah. Yeah. It's the only people we care about, people that we align with. Right.
Let's talk about ANS.
Man, yeah. So, hey, I'll put the disclaimer out. Listen, we would love to give you the actual messaging, right? We would love to give you some memo that they wrote out announcing a course change. If that does happen, if that message does exist, we don't have it. Okay. We know a lot of people. We got a lot of information. We're not speaking from a point of authority here. What we're trying to do is get you the best possible information for this one main reason. The information that's out there is wrong. You need to listen to this episode, because there's misinformation that's out there. We're going to give you the baseline of everything. We're not going to give you everything behind the scenes. It's not our place to, right? I will say, if you work in the Air Force Special Warfare Training Wing and you would like to come on this podcast and give everybody the message immediately, let us know. We do 3.5 million views a month. Let's go. That's high. That's our lifetime views.
The official, unofficial podcast of the Air Force and of Air Force Special Warfare. So
open invite.
Anything you want to put out, we're ready.
Without further ado, happy July 4th, everybody. It's Trent. It's me. This is the one that you've been waiting for. They changed some of the stuff that's going on down at SWIC, down at ANS, down at the old Indoc, at Indoc 2.0, at the Chapman Training Annex. It used to be Medina on Joint Base San Antonio, Lackland. That used to just be Lackland Air Force Base. Listen, things change all the time. But they did make some changes, and we are going to talk about them here because, number one, there's some bad information that's out there. I saw a silly post on Reddit where somebody they were so close to being right, but they were so far from being right at the same time. So we're going to level the bubbles. We've gotten this information by hook and by crook. We feel pretty good about it. The course is going live. As you guys already know, the cat is out of the bag. So you know what we're going to do? We're just going to get you the facts of the matter and what we have, and we're going to go from there. Trent.
But first,
But first, we have to talk about, like, if we're going to use these words and we're going to talk about the process, we got to lay it out, right? Now, I will say there is one person out there that knows this like the back of their hand. They've worked in the enterprise for, I don't know, more than 30 years at this point, 30, 35 years. I don't know.
My entire life. Yeah.
He was my Indoc instructor. He was the commandant of the school at one point for an entire life. Like, his name is synonymous with this history, and we can't get him to come on. We've asked him a couple of times. I can't wait. Maybe there's some roadblock, but I'll put it out there. Ross, we want you to come on, man. We want you to talk about this stuff. We'd love to have you. It'd be really cool. You've got our number.
By name request. That's pretty unusual. We don't ask too many people by name to come on.
Well, we have an open invite all the time. Leadership, you want to come on here? Anybody that, wants to come on there and vet themselves and speak on their real name, and you think you have something to bring to the podcast, hey, let's message. Let's talk about it. Let's get out there. But we're going to have hard conversations. So, Trent, take me back. We did the indoctrination course. That's what it was called. The indoctrination course for a long time. It had a specific structure. Everybody knows it was about 10 weeks long. There were some admin weeks that were put on there. We started having a development team, or, kind of like a ramp up team that was, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. There was a whole bunch of different stuff, right? So let's just go all the way back. So we're going to do recent history, though. We're not going back to like the creation of Mordor, because that's not what I want to do. So we're going to go back in 99, 2000. Combat Control ended up leaving Indoc, right? So they went to their own selection process. It was the Combat Control Orientation course, I believe, in the very beginning, or CCSC, they called it at one point. So, man, just take us back. So we had the indoctrination course. This was pre, 9/11. CCT ended up splitting off and doing their own thing for reasons, and then, transitioned to what Indoc was doing right, and then what Indoc was doing wrong.
Yeah, I think there were two things when Combat Control and Pararescue were doing Indoc together. And this is based on everybody that I've talked to. I've talked to a bunch of guys that were there at the time, and obviously worked with a bunch of dudes.
Peaches went through Indoc. I went through Indoc without controllers. Like, we have a pretty good sway on this one.
But I think the thing number one to understand is Combat Control was not first fiddle in that course. Most of the folks showed up, wanted to be Pararescue, and Combat Controllers, it's kind of like how TAC-P feels sometimes now, where they get the leftovers or whatever. And I think that's how it went. That's the story I've heard a million times. It's like, some guys like Peaches show up and they're like, I'd rather be a combat controller. That sounds like more like my lane. And there's a bunch of that. But a lot of it was, the majority of it was pararescue. So that was issue, I think, number one. As this is, combat control was coming into their own. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't always been like the powerhouse of AFSOC or whatever they are. You know what I mean? And
they're
then
the driving force, because they're preponderance of force, right? Like, there's so few PJs and crows that work inside of AFSOC. Like, of course, their voice is going to be the loudest. And then, of course, the minority, which happens to be PJs in this case, are always going to rage against the red hats. Like, that's just always been a thing. I don't know what to tell you. And then, put yourself in the context of this time, right? Like, PJs had the only mission. Like, they were doing hatters. The only thing going off was like earthquakes in San Francisco and doing rescues and stuff. And the controllers were constantly like, hey, can we get on this training trip? We'll run your radios. Can we come do stuff? People forget, because before, GWAP, before 9/11, before, Combat Control took over the JTAC mission, they really had the JTAC, mission on a scramble or on a stranglehold. Like, unless you like, if your call sign was Jaguar, you did whatever you wanted. You own every airspace everywhere. It's just the way it was. But that wasn't happening in 99, 2000. The controllers were trying to, find their way through global access mission and find a history from their pathfinders. And the 2-4 dudes were always doing 2-4 stuff, but that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to note that Combat Control has done a really good job over the years of surviving, and the way that they survived was through the paperwork. And we've had a few guests on here to talk about that kind of stuff, is organization, paperwork, writing yourself into missions, and doing all these other types of things. And so what happened too was they looked at their pipeline and they're like, hey, like, we got to send our guys to ATC, and when we have the Combat Control School at Pope Air Force Base at the time. And they're like, why are we washing so many guys out in the beginning? And it's like, are we really getting the guys that we want, or are we just getting the leftovers from pararescue? And they were like, okay, we're gonna switch things around. We're gonna put dive as a 5-level requirement after the pipeline, and we're gonna ramp these dudes up. We want to open the aperture. I don't know if any of this is sounding familiar to things that have happened in recent history.
Right.
Open the aperture for our candidates.
That's one through line that I want people to pay attention to. Like, we're doing this history piece for a reason. We're describing the way things were for a reason.
Right. So the theory is, in the beginning, was bring in guys that were not necessarily ready for dive right off the bat, that wouldn't have made it through Indoc necessarily. It's like some of them obviously would have, but whatever. And then build them up over time. And then CCS, the school at Pope, was kind of the crux. That was their Indoc, right? That's where they had their Hell Week and all these other types of things. And I mean, it was hard. It was real hard. And then they would graduate the pipeline, go on over to Hurlburt Field, and then do more training. Then they'd hit free fall, pre-dive, and dive, and all those other things. And so the idea was to get more candidates at get them earlier on in their like physical development, and then bring them through and get them through dive school the other way. So Aaron is talking to somebody else right now. So this is exciting. But
I did throw you off. This is going to be funny as a real-time update. I can't wait to tag you in it. Continue.
Here's the problem is once GWOT kicked off and guys started going down range, and then they started coming back to being instructors, the orientation course, which for all intents and purposes was not that hard, and then the schoolhouse at Keesler Air Force Base was not that hard. It was kind of a gentleman's course. Like they would mess with you a little bit, but there was like one, maybe two combat controllers there in the beginning. And they'd just be like, yeah, work out. Like these are the workouts. I'm going to take you for a run. It's nothing crazy. Every once in a while they do something just to keep you on your toes. And then you get to CCS, and CCS is the big thing, right? So what had happened was though, like every time someone comes back and they're like, man, like this needs to be harder. Like these kids are going to go to combat.
Yeah.
Like like your friends are dying and blah, blah, blah. The problem with
that is that you see gatekeeping at every level. When you have that drift at every respective level, because listen, controllers are better than PJs. A shift is better than B shift. Air Force is better than the Army. Marine Corps is always going to be better than the Navy. Like, listen, we always set ourselves into binaries all the time, right? You're always going to other the other people when we're having these conversations. You're literally going to think like, hey man, I am the one that is awesome and the other people aren't. This whole like you're going to work at a school and you're going to look at the students that are coming through your school and be like, these guys suck. Those guys down at selection, they haven't given them anything hard yet. We're going to give them something really, really tough to get through here. And we're going to call it sit training. And we're going to keep them up for 5 straight days. And then you get to the next school and they're like, that wasn't hard enough. We're going to know that whatever these guys are doing to the school, that's not hard enough. And it was just this progressive, like just getting kicked in the face further and further and further down the road. That's what opening up, like when they got out of Indoc, they were like, okay, well, the selection thing down because they're not doing all this Indoc stuff. The people that had been through Indoc, like these are the people making the calls now. The people are like, no, it's not tough enough. We're going to ramp them up every time we go through. That's fine if it doesn't lead to huge institutional drift and gatekeeping, but it always leads to huge institutional drift and gatekeeping.
Yeah, and Indoc's right down the road, right? So like you look at your candidates, you look at their candidates.
You can see the buildings. The buildings on Chapman used to be like Medina. Used to be, no kidding, it was like a hill. It was the track, and then it was this other building that was condemned, and that's where we lived.
And I do have, some of this comes from good intentions, right? Like if you go through the pipeline and you deploy the first time in GWOT, and it is chaos and it is hell on earth and all these other things, and you're like, maybe this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And so like, I think it's a natural inclination when you go back to being an instructor to fill those gaps that you had into the students. Right. And so like, it's not all coming from like this, like they just need to be harder, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. Like I kind of sucked on my last deployment or my first deployment. I want to make sure you guys are ready. So it comes from like a good place, but it leads to bad outcomes. Are you on mute?
That's a great one. I've put myself on mute. It leads to the best possible scenario too, is like when an instructor is ranting and raving on the pool deck, obviously drawing from a past experience, but he doesn't do a super good job of explaining why that past experience is relevant. He's just really upset about it. The students are like, yeah, we got smoked today for the instructor. We didn't mark our kit correctly. And the instructors absolutely smoked us. They were so mad. It's one of those things that you won't recognize until you see it. Like, everybody has our isms, come up with whatever thing you want, keeping your weapon within arm's reach, or, having a certain weapon condition when you're out at work, and, knowing, certain pieces of information. Like everybody has those isms and they expect everybody like to do those. But sometimes like I distinctly remember an instructor screaming about somebody's water bottle was outside of arm's reach. And this guy just went off and just smoked us at the pool for like the longest time because he was really mad about it. And we had no clue. Well, then I went on a deployment, and you're in a building and you just set your weapon down by the front door. Well, what happens when that building blows up? And then you got to find a way to go find your weapon and go fight. Like there's reasons behind it, but you don't understand that when you're at Indoc. So those things, to your point, they're good and they're bad, right? They're good when they're pieces of information that you're giving somebody so that they can avoid the hardship that you had. That's good. They're bad when you go too far and you automatically start thinking like every student sucks. You're all terrible. And this is so important that I'm going to try to kill you over it. Like that's where it goes to the bad side.
Yeah. Well, and I think we'd gotten to there, right? Like, so we got away with these things for a long time. The pipelines, I think, got progressively harder because of these reasons. And then, but like we had enough people coming in, like in the throes of GWAT, we had plenty of candidates coming in the front door, at least enough to like get through the 90% attrition rate and to get onto team and still do the job. Everyone was still like working way too much.
Oh yeah.
We were never going to get our numbers.
People, right?
But there were enough bodies for the meat grinder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when that slowed down and when we started to like look at things and a few different things happened, GWAT started to slow down, and then we decided to become our own group and wing down in AATC. And it's like, oh no, we're solely responsible for everything that happens here now. Maybe we should take a hard look at the way that we do business and see if there's any efficiencies that can be gained. And also, let's group everybody together under this umbrella called Special Warfare in the Air Force, which I think we could have come up with a better name, but whatever.
Well, and then during that time too is the WISR, so the Women in Service Review. We were about to remember this was part of the larger combat exclusion expiring for women so that they could serve in line units. So everybody had to do their own directed, basically look at job performance characteristics, standards, cultures, norms, the entire thing to get ready for this. It was much ado about nothing. Like looking back on it now, like we spent so much time and energy and effort and real emotional drama over this event, and really it turned out to be much ado about nothing. But it was during the time it was highly stressful. It got a lot of eyes, had a lot of people on it. This is also where the OFT came out of, right? So we redefined the job characteristics. The PT test before then basically was a run and some cows, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, flutter kicks, and a swim. That's basically what it was. We used to call it the AFSOC PT test, whatever. We decided that's not indicative of fitness. This is where we came up with the OFT as well. And then we're starting to go through these undulations where we're like, okay, well, if we are going to assess and select for these people that can do these different job tasks, then we're going to look at everything. And this is when we started having the conversation of, hey, Indoc might need to go to assessment and selection. So how was it during that transition time? I mean, you were there. You were in the buildings and having the conversation. So as you guys were transitioning, what was it like on the ground?
Well, I mean, it's funny because in the beginning, it's easy to see all the problems, right? And it's easy to look at that and be like, we need to change everything because this is broken. Right. I'll tell you that the funnest story I ever, the funnest thing I ever did was we had a whiteboard, my buddy and I, combat controller, and we were going through the combat control and SAUT pipeline. We're like, how do we make this as efficient as possible? And after like 2 months maybe of us racking our brains and making this as efficient as possible, what we realized was we wanted the PJ pipeline, more or less.
Right.
We're like, oh, right. This is the way to do it. To a certain, but like that's what we came up with.
Yeah. And let me tell you, PJs everywhere have said this from the very beginning. Somebody left me a comment on I think it was the Discord, and they were like, yeah, I just want to find out what the best apprentice course is. I was like, no, short conversation. It's the PJ apprentice course. Our students that graduate the PJ apprentice course are on a skill level that is commensurate with the people that graduate STTS. Like, that's just a fact. The line items, the things that we do, the tactical employment, like CCS and the apprentice course, the pararescue apprentice course, those are not like equivalents. They just aren't for training and what they are. And this is I work there. I made the new course for the pararescue apprentice course. We talked all the time. Like that was our sister squadron basically in the 351st, 352nd, 3rd and 4th, right? Like we talked to those folks all the time. Like it was just different.
The CCS, the Pope course is the first half. The second half is at Hurlburt. So like, yeah, you're right. That's why, and this is like paperwork stuff, right? Like when you start looking at it and you're in the middle of GWAT, you're like, we really need 5 levels before we really come on team. We don't have time to train these guys up like we did pre 9/11. Right. And so if combat control would have had it their way, I think they would have shoved everything back into AATC and set it up that way, right? Because pararescue from the beginning was like, we need 3 levels to be able to do these things. But like in the pre 9/11, combat controllers are like, we'll take care of it. Mm-hmm. And then it's just like,
it's a difference between the cultures too, just between the two tribes, right? Like because PJ is like, we didn't always have a mission. We were always just, like, you're just sitting waiting for a hurricane to happen kind of at some, like there are distinct periods of time where again, the tier 1 units are going to be tier 1 units. They're going to respond to stuff that's on the world stage. You didn't know about it tight. They were getting work. They were doing stuff, right? Everybody else though, it's like there were distinct time periods where you're like, well, like 94 to 99. Is there any Conflict. I mean, there were some people hunting war criminals out of the England units, right? Like the ST units were kind of getting after those folks, and they have some wild stories about being in Yukon. But really, the preponderance of forces, you're just kind of waiting for stuff to happen. So the PJs, like, we're like, yeah, give me a 3 level, we'll train him up. That's why you call him an apprentice. He hooks into his staff sergeant, and we figure out how to do this. That's always how we've been. So when, even us, we're like, yeah, you're going to give me a 3 level. Well, just make sure the 3 level can perform to this level so that my own green team, which we always had set up at the rescue squadrons, can take him to get him ready to go fastest amount of time possible, get him his MQT, get him out and deployed fast. He doesn't necessarily need to be a 5 level to deploy, but we're going to get him there. Yet combat control, SR, SAUT in the past, they did it a little bit opposite. They were like, no, this guy's got to be a 5 level qualled on some stuff before he can come here, because there's a possibility that he could go off by himself without the team to do the enabler mission.
Right. Well, I mean, and certain skill sets, right? Like you guys have the medical stuff, but we had, you know, like, and we don't own everything. We don't own ATC, qualifications. We don't own the weather qualifications and all that other stuff. So, you guys had Scott O'Grady, who wasn't that his name, Scott, who did everything wrong. Scott
O'Grady is the guy that punched out. He was a pilot that got rescued by the Marines, the Marine trap team. Keith O'Grady is a very famous PJ that went to Haiti.
No,
but
I was talking about the pilot that messed everything up and we still managed to save him.
He did everything wrong. That's the story from SEER School and Scott O'Grady. He was running at the rescue force. There was a 19-year-old on a belt-fed weapon on the freaking tail of a 53, and he came out of the woods running in camouflage. And the only reason that 19-year-old didn't smoke him, he said, because he was running and the front of his bill flipped up, and he had one of those dumb orange bills underneath his boonie cap. Mm-hmm. He's like, that's the only reason why. He's like, I knew that was U.S. issued boonie cap, and I didn't smoke
run
him.
With the rescue guys with your weapon. That's the best way to do it.
I'm coming. It's the old joke about, elected officials. I'm going to give them this chocolate revolver. And because I know that they're very busy, I'm just going to run up and hand it to them. Like, that's how you get shot, buddy. Anyway, sorry, derailed there. But so differences between the tribes and how we did things, and, training in general, the apprentice courses, all that stuff aside, we looked at the beginning of the pipeline for a couple different reasons. One, we needed to evolve, so to speak. And then number two, we needed to get people in, and we had to look at what we have now, which is an attributes-based assessment and selection. Sorry, go back. That's where we were.
Yeah, right. So Indoc, the things that were wrong with Indoc in the beginning is the numbers, just like it's always been, the numbers of the attrition numbers were not very accurate. Right. So you get a ton of folks that would come in, they wouldn't even in process Indoc yet. They would take their PT test for their entrance standard, and they wouldn't even put them in the course yet. And if you failed it, you have to wait around until the next time to take it again.
It was a day one PT test. Time. Yeah, right. Guys would just get called out.
But they were smart because they wouldn't put them into the system. So like, this doesn't count against our course attrition. And so our course attrition doesn't look as bad as it could be. So that was one of the things that it's like, guys, come on, just like, let's all be honest. But they were taking advantage of the system. And then even though towards the end that the guy running Indoc, I got a lot of respect for him. But he can't be there at every single pool session, every single thing. Like when we started the prep course, we're like, hey guys, you need to run Indoc the way that you've always run Indoc, and forget that we had these chuckleheads for 8 weeks before. Mm-hmm. And humans don't listen, and they do their thing. And even when the commander comes out and says, just run it exactly the way you've been doing it, it just doesn't work that way, because they're like, you guys have had 8 weeks of training, and how come like you're not better, and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to ramp this up because I didn't have the prep course.
That happened. So it just didn't work. That happened so fast in the team room. Like, people don't understand. Like that's one conversation over lunch that can change the whole feeling of an instructor staff or of a group of dudes. It takes one person to come into lunch and be like, you know what, man, these dudes did okay today. They've been here for 8 weeks. These guys are really like basic day one stuff. It takes one person to go, you know what? They did that to me the other day too. Like, what did we even talk about? It's the simplest stuff. And then it just snowballs. Like, it goes from there.
Yeah. So even though the curriculum, what's on paper for Pararescue and Doc back then was probably close to perfect. But the way it was run was not necessarily the best way. And so even just having those inconsistencies, right, is a good reason to shut it down. And if you have inconsistencies, too many inconsistencies, and some other things that happen, like the first female that showed up that was told to shave her lip, these things kill some credibility, and that's why some of the problems started, and that's why a lot of folks down there at Chapman are really hesitant to even say the word Indoc out loud right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and that whole thing too, it's also rooted in, man, it's just in the way that we communicate now. People attach context, feelings, malice. People attach all kinds of things two words and then apply it like out of context, right? So it's not that they hate Indoc. It's not that people are like, oh, don't say Indoc because it's bad branding. That's not the point. What they're doing is that when they say like you don't even want to get referred to it like that, is because that person has a negative connection to that time frame. Yep. All of the things that are happening, the drama that was going on, they hear Indoc, they're like, well, back when it was Indoc, I just remember how bad my life sucked because of all these things. We're not even allowed to call it that anymore. Don't even say it because it represents a bad time. Now, people have their own motivations for doing it. And what those motivations that cause the bad time are, I'm not here to talk about. But I will tell you that is wise, because people look at it and they're like, hey, man, like calling it Indoc, that harkens back to a time where, we didn't necessarily do a whole lot of things that I agree with or think that worked. So I don't want you to say it. Like, okay, but that's the reasoning behind it.
Yeah. Well, and so like that was happening, and then up at Pope, they're not Hell Week. They weren't allowed to call it Hell Week anymore. But whatever
the
stress inoculation. Some of the things that happen up there is like it's hilarious. But if you have a guy take a cup of water up to the top of the tower, and he's got to fill up a 5-gallon jug or whatever, and just go over and over and over again. It's just like, I get it that you're inoculating the stress, but these are not attached to actual line items.
Right.
And so it's really hard to defend these things, especially when people start like digging in and looking at it. And then now we have 06s whose careers are on the line. They're like, guys, we can't be doing this. Like, how do I justify this? And they're getting a lot of other pressure from Congress and all these other things. So anyway, what we decided to do was blow it all up and start over.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked out in an interesting way.
It worked out. So let's go, first of all, the good things about blowing it up and start over. We're going to talk in general, right? So moving on from Indoc, can you frame this in a way that you had hope for it in the beginning?
Yes.
I knew you could. You're so positive. You're an idealist.
No, well, it's so like we have the drift, right? And if more than anything, and I was like, I don't care if we call it Indoc again, but like the bones of Indoc are fantastic. Mm-hmm. And if you want to call it assessment selection, that's fine. If you want to change some things about it, that's fine, and make it more, combat control, SR, PJ, muddy the waters a little bit. It's not just like for pararescue. That I'm okay with that. If we just kind of mix it all together, but we reset the standards and we bring in the cadre and we eliminate that drift. Like drift is always going to happen, mm-hmm. but it's like the idea that we can start over is awesome. Like we have the opportunity to actually train people and not just beat people up for a year and a half and be like, here's a beret, congratulations, you're broken.
Right. And then here at this time too, like we're formalizing the SR, pipelines and TCSs and, CFETPs. This is all happening in the same like 3 or 4 year period, right? So tons of exciting things. You would think it would be great. However, it wasn't great because there was some initial feedback items, some things that were bad about blowing it all up. I'll start this one out, and it's benign. I'm not going to call anybody out, but we pulled too many levers at once, right? Like just to your point, Indoc, there were things about Indoc that were great that we never should have changed. We never should have touched, right? The progressive, objective, physical evaluation piece of Indoc, I always liked. You showed up on Monday and you got evaluated. You had progressive standards that you had to go to. You knew what you're going to hit at the end. Now, and then like, having people that train for grad standards or doing whatever else, like, listen, there is something to be said for showing up on Monday morning, being disciplined, getting evaluated, and being like, hey, you needed 72 push-ups today. You got 68 push-ups today. You're out. You got to refire. Like there is something to be said for that. And that's what everybody freaked out about is like, where are the objective standards? Where are the objective standards? I will say, if you pull too many levers at once, you don't know what's working on the back end, right?
Dude, if you were building levers that didn't exist just to pull them.
Right. You talk to any combat controller and he said, hey, you're going to either start at the radio or you're going to start at your microphone and you're going to work all the way through the system. You're not going to unhook everything at once and then try to put it back together. Be like, oh, I think it's the mic, and then replace the mic and then hook everything back up and then function check it. That's not how you do that. It's not it's not how you do medicine. We know these answers. We just pulled way too many levers at once. We threw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. Things that were working, that were great, that were vetted, that did have data behind them, we jettisoned to make it all a new course, to make sure that nothing remained of the old course, right? And then we went to the attributes-based assessment and selection model, which, newsflash, everybody, came out of the SMUs, came out of the teams that up there. That's how they run their selection. It's more attributes-based, and there's good and bad things with that too. But I'll open with the bad thing that I didn't like, being as nice as I possibly can, is that you pulled too many levers at once. Slight changes and deviations in what you're doing. This did work. Okay, we're going to continue to do that. Oh, this didn't work. We're not going to do that. We can't. It needs to be an iterative process. But because of the pressure, number one, because the career field and everybody that owned a beret just blew up. Like we're having conversations about if we're going to wear the same color beret, and that made people feel a type of way. Like we're having all these conversations.
That was an announcement by the group commander said this is going to happen. Like 100%. It wasn't like people were like,
they sent out a PowerPoint with
we're all wearing gray berets, and I'm laughing.
Yeah, dude, crazy times. But like, man, if you pull a lever and you can't objectively look at the output, if you give an input and can't look at the output, we used to say at Kirtland, it takes a year to figure out if we're changing. And this is when we would just change the blocks of the apprentice course. Every once in a while, you'd be like, these people suck. Their medicine sucks. We're going to give them medicine first, and then we're going to hold them in that standard the rest of the course, and that's going to make it better. And then you get a year later, you're like, oh, man, the medical block up front is killing us. It's way too much MER. We don't have enough logistics to do. It takes you a year to figure that out, right? Yeah. People wanted results. I was getting texts the first week that ANS ran. Be like, how's it going, bro? Like, first of all, I don't work there. Second of all, like, what do you expect? Like, how fast do you like? We had hundreds of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands. I hope I didn't misspoke. I think 100,000 people total in the Air Force's history have tried out and gone through Indoc. I think that's probably. I'd have to look at the numbers, but maybe.
Like, I don't care. Through the front door, probably.
Okay, so tens of thousands, definitely, maybe hundreds of thousands in our history. I'll have to look it up. Maybe that's a good Google. I'll try to figure it out. We had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of data points. That's what fed the Indoc process. That's why it stood for so long. And I didn't understand this until much later. Like the people that were angry about the Indoc thing, they were like, no, it wasn't perfect, but it was so good that we couldn't prove it wrong until you change the rules of the game. When you change the rules of a game from objective physical standards to an assessment selection that was focused on attributes, the second that those focus shift, because they can't be your number one priority. It's got to be one or the other. They're mutually exclusive. That's just the way priorities work. When you change that, the people that were upset were like, yeah, but why? This is supported by shit tons of data. And the whizzer and this initial look at changing this course, it's supported by hopes and dreams, right? It's supported by a population that is put through one of these selections that is not the same as we get here. Having an operator go to the Army, tier 1 unit, a guy that's been to Ranger School, a guy that's, spent 2 years training for this thing, that is a remarkably different candidate than somebody that's coming off the street to go be a pararescueman. However, we put that assessment selection model down there and started making it work. So to button up my rant, we pulled too many levers. We didn't know what was or wasn't working. And then the update speed that people requested, you just backed yourself into a corner. There was no way to communicate that you were doing a good thing.
Well, and becoming a Ranger is not the same thing as going Army SMU.
You're right.
Very, very different processes.
You were correct.
And we tried to meld that. So like as much as I have nothing but respect for the Air Force SMU.
Right.
But when you bring folks in from that environment, especially when they have rank and they've never worked within the training environment, and you can't get much further away from the training environment from AATC than where they're coming from. And that's just the way business is done and the way things have to work for the numbers that we're working with. It leads to just craziness, just chaos. Because they're like, this is the way it should be. And like, no, guys, I know you're officers, but you need to take yourself back to day one. And realize like day one of college, the first day that you decided to be a stow or a crow, and look at who that person is, because you didn't go straight up to North Carolina and start doing crazy stuff. So we tend to forget it. And I think there's some good, like everything else, right? Good intentions. And I don't hate these guys, but a lot of mistakes were made. And a lot of people assumed that they knew better. And then, and it wasn't just that too many levers were pulled. It's that we would pull 10 levers. And like you said, before we even knew what those levers did, we're pulling the next 10. Right. And then before we even know what that results are, we're pulling the next 10. And it's kind of like, it seemed like the organization got addicted to change, right? As long as we're changing, like no one can hold us accountable for anything. And it's like, guys, right. or we just stop and see where we're at so that we know if we made the right decisions or not.
Right. So, as we go through there, there's a whole bunch of drama. There's a whole bunch of back and forth. The timing was wonky. Everything was happening. We went through the pandemic and all this other stuff. And then finally we kind of clear out really 2022, sort of late 2022, early 2023. We really start getting back to business. So we're going to talk about the, go ahead.
And I will say, as much as we were on here the other day talking about the new wing chief not being a beret wearer.
Right.
One of the things that really helped our wing out is we brought in a non-beret wearer commander who'd been part of AFSOC before, but he was like, everybody stop. We're not changing things anymore, which was super positive. I'm not saying that it should be like that all the time, it really helped us out in that way.
Shout out. Thank you for making the right call on that one. Everything else, though, careful. You're up for review. Hilarious. So I want to talk about the structure as it stands now, because we got to this place where things normalized and we were going through it. It was business as usual, sort of status quo. Things had normalized to a point. So let's walk through the process as it stands. Meow, right? Like in the context of the time and now. So right now it's 7 weeks of SWIC. Okay, you're going to show up. You're going to go through the special warfare candidate course. You got about a week of dead space. And there's an admin week. It's essentially for A&S. So you're going to do all the stuff that you need to do for A&S. There's 2-ish straight weeks of assessment. So and then 2 times like hell weeks, if you want to think of it like that, right? So you're getting assessed day in, day out. So for that first 4 week period. It's just balls to the wall. You're just getting kicked in the face every single day. There's assessment. They ramp it up. You have longer training days. You're not sleeping. Okay. That's the entirety of the first 4 weeks. Right. And at this point you hit the bridge, that's assessment. And then this is selection. So now you're going to know if you're going to follow on to the next part of the course. Trent, did I misspeak on anything?
No. I mean, there's going to be different blocks, just like you said. We want to assess you technically to see where you are at your physical fitness and your ability to do certain things, and then we want to see if you have that grit. Right? We're gonna break you down and see how much you lose when you're tired, wet, and haven't slept, and all that other stuff. Hungry.
And we've talked about assessment selection a million times. So if you want to hear an in-depth explanation of that, that's not what we're here for. We're here to talk you through the changes, right? So we just talked about SWIC, then you got into A&S, and then you got through pre-dive, right? You got to pre-dive and you started doing all those pre-dive things to get ready to actually go for dive school, right? So, pre-dive is its own thing. The instructors are going to treat you a little bit differently. You're going to focus on those pre-dive tasks to make sure that you're ready to go to Air Force Combat Dive School. Now, at this point, right now, right this second, the controllers, the SR, and the STOs are not going to Air Force Combat Dive School.
Why not?
Well, because a general that now no longer works as the head of AFSOC said that we are no longer going to send our students to dive school for a number of different reasons. It would get them to the team faster. They could do it later. It happened really, really quickly. We've talked about it here. You can go look at the reel. It's still up. I was wrong. I was like, there's no way this thing turns that fast. And it turned literally the next day. The guy issued a letter saying no longer will they go. Okay. Change is part of the game. That sucks. We all disagree with it. We all hate it. As we speak right now, Rep. Anna Paulina Luna from Florida, which is right next door to Matt Gaetz and their entire district down there, she pushed up some legislation that directs Congress to basically tell the military, hey, put dive school back in this for these reasons. Now, it does it include everybody? Is it a viable legislative process? Can Congress direct the military to do so? Those are questions we got to talk about, right? But the bottom line and the fact of the matter is dive school isn't happening right now. So that caused a bunch of questions, right? Like a course that was already being envisioned. Remember, we're talking about changing to the new course. We just haven't got there. We're setting the breadcrumbs out so we can talk about it in a coherent fashion. These changes were already being made. People were already getting input and they were already like, hey, we got to change this. We're getting feedback. We're seeing the product. We're taking in all these data points. We got to start thinking about the next move, right? Those discussions are always tough. You're always trying to keep them under your hat. They always get out though. Right. So the first kind of rumblings start happening on Reddit. Trent, talk us through that one, which is my favorite one here, because we're quickly getting up to very recent history. So now we can just kind of BS. But the Reddit rumors were out that they're changing the course. Okay. And by the way, in retrospect, they weren't rumors. So everybody that we talked to on the military side of the fence, it's still in when we're like, hey, what's going on? And you lied to us on the phone and said that you weren't doing anything like that. I got those receipts, dog. So they start looking at a new course and they start figuring out how to change some stuff. And I imagine, and this is just my assumption from working in the enterprise for a little bit, I imagine that the dive school decision probably put a freaking fire under everybody to figure out what it is to do. Trent, am I off?
I think that we were heading this direction. The guys that are doing the training and the folks that are doing the job every day, they wanted to head in this direction anyway.
They did. But yeah, to make it clear to everybody, this is an instructor ground up led initiative. Like the subject matter experts, the people that should have come up with this did come up with the changes.
I think this all started with Ivan Ruiz, the whole make Indoc great again thing. And but I think that started everybody thinking about it. Cause then when you go down there to be an instructor, you're like, what are we doing? And if you've been an instructor for a long time, right. You're like, I don't know if this is the best way to assess and to select our candidates.
Right.
And so what had happened with the other thing was it was a funny story. Some stuff came out on Reddit. We had a FAQ episode, and somebody had asked us that question, and we said something totally benign about it. I think we'd already recorded our opinions on how to make ANS better again, which is pretty big overall. It was like, hey, objective standards are pretty rad, and if you publish those, it really helps the candidates out. Helps bring people in the door because now they know what to train for, and it's not so much like there's a certain level of vague that exists for SOF and all these kinds of things that helps bring people in the door. And then there's a certain point where it's a negative.
Right.
When guys are like, well, what are the standards? And we're like, meh, I don't know.
Well, it's the funniest thing too, to watch the tier 1 units. Like how many times have we had Mr. Free on to talk about he tells people exactly, they have a training program for their assessment selection. They tell you what to do. They tell you how to train. He will tell you about everything. They have a podcast. Go check out Insight Through Experience. It's great. He talks to people that just got selected. There's a bunch of our friends on there. It's fire, right? Because it should be like the NFL Combine. You should know all of the objective standards before you go in, and you should go there to perform. That's the case that we were making with this entire thing. And then Reddit started bubbling about a new course. And then our reels dropped us. Benign response that we've put out there a million times. We're like, yeah, you should go back to really an objective based model where you're getting an objective evaluation through there. And there you go. And we got a talking to.
The DMs and the phone calls started in pretty quick. I was so confused in the beginning. I was like, wait, what? Huh? Like, because I'm not a Reddit guy. I don't spend a lot of time on Reddit.
I don't have Reddit guys. If you told me something was on Reddit, like the times people send me Reddit links, I go to open it and it says continue on browser or download the app, and then I close it because that's too much. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
That's how much I'm on Reddit.
It was kind of a hilarious confluence of events that led to people thinking that we knew what was going on,
which we didn't.
No, the closest, open kimono, the closest I'd gotten to knowing what was going on is one of my friends said, there might be a change. I can't talk about it.
Right.
Like, well, then there's nothing to talk about on the podcast. Right. Also, you're one of my best friends and a person I highly respect. I'm not gonna go out there and be like, well, he said,
Right. Jeez. This person's real name. Here's their address. This is their comments on the event. All right. All that is much ado about nothing, right? So there's just more turmoil. And then finally we get to where we are now. So now there is a material change in the course. Now I want to say there's always changes in the course. So for everybody out there that's like, oh, there's a course change. There's a course changing. I need to know all of the things so that I can properly prepare. No, you don't. No, you don't. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what events we run. It doesn't matter if any of this is different or if it's all the same. It's still completely and totally dependent upon you. I used to tell my students all the time before the big evals that they, were afraid that they were going to get kicked out for. I'd be like, listen, I can give you this sheet. I can tell you the exact scenario that's going to happen. I can give you every single standard. I can tell you already know the standard. I gave it to you in the brief. I can give you there's no surprise here. You just need to perform. If you don't perform though, you got to get out. That's what I used to tell them all the time. Okay. Change is a constant. We are always going to change the process that we do in order to make the process better. So we work through this whole thing. We decide that it's time to change. We start gathering information. Here's what we got for you. So the very first thing, okay? So we're going to start from like you're in the development process, right? So the one thing that has changed first and foremost, and we're going to just, let's mark this right here. Here's what we're going to do. This can stand on its own. This is the process that we have for you right this second. We're going to start from soup to nuts. You got to go find a recruiter. You got to go use the find a recruiter function. You can use our Discord. You can DM us. We'll help you find a recruiter. You got to go talk about what job you want to do. There's two ways that you're going to go in. The SWOE V we all know about, right? SWOE V is a big bucket of folks that all want to be special operators, whether it's pararescue, combat control, TAC P, SR, they're all going to get in there for the development program. SWOE V is I'm going to go and try to be assessed and selected. I'm not going to pick a job though. I know I want to be a special operator. I'm going to go through the development program. The other thing that you can do now is that you can go through a recruiter and you can get a guaranteed contract for a specific job. We've explained the reasoning behind this on other podcasts. We're not going to get into it here. We're just going to lay out the bones of what we're doing. You can go and say, I want to be a PJ. I want a specific PJ contract. Or you can go and you can say, I want to be a special operator. I don't know what. I want time to decide. I want to be in the development program for SWOE. And I want to ship as SWOE and pick my job, like we're going to talk about later, at the Medina Training Annex, at Chapman Training Annex down in Lackland. Okay. So that's first things first. Trent, did I misspeak?
Nope. It's kind of like a dream sheet.
Got it. So you go in there. It's exactly like a dream sheet that you'll see later. You just put your choices in there. Okay. So now you're going to ship to basic. You're going to go through the development program with your developer, regardless of if you have a specific job or if you have a, like the SWOE V, special warfare operator enlistment vector. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, Ty, I hope I could be wrong. Sorry, flame me in the comments. It happens every week. So you get through the development program ran by a special operator. You're going to have great guidance there. Hopefully you're listening to this podcast and make sure that you know everything you're getting into. And then you show up to basic, right? You'll be in your own flight. You'll have input with instructors. You'll go along with all of the same guys and gals that are trying to do the same thing as you, and you'll go through basic training. As a flight, you'll have instructors come over and they'll start talking to you about your soon-to-be move over across base when you graduate basic. Basic training, that's the end of it. Trent, you got add-ons.
And those briefings that they're going to come give you are vanilla on purpose. We're not trying to talk you into a job at that point. When the instructors come over and they give you the briefings on the different AFSCs, they're just going to be like, this is what it is. You're going to get the flavor once you get to SWIC. You're going to meet all the instructors of all the different flavors, and they're going to tell you their stories, and they're going to have their personalities and all that other stuff. But they have to take their time to come over and brief you at BMT, which is miserable for them. And B, we're just trying to, that's just an informational briefing. So don't go in there being like, I'm expecting this. No. They're just going to tell you about the jobs, and then they're going to leave so that you have a little seed stuck in your head to, grow later on when you're at SWIC.
And let me tell you about the feedback. This is what we've heard time and time again. So I'll just pass it on to you. You're going to change. If you go in SWOE and you kind of have, you're really on the fence. Like maybe you want to be an SR, maybe you want to be a PJ, maybe, you really think you want to be a controller. As you listen to these instructors that are the top of the top, they're the subject matter expert that were so good that we want them to work at an organization where you see them first. So these are the people that are talking to you. Of course, you are going to be freaking starstruck right away. And when you hear a Silver Star winner tell you about a mission where he dropped, on 100 people and he saved an entire battalion, like, of course, that makes you want to be a combat controller. Listening to a PJ talk about ropes or whatever they're passionate about these days. Of course, you're going to like the hardest part about that area is like settling on a job because you're going to be pulled in all these different directions. That's the point. On these initial briefs, you're not going to sit there and like ask them a million questions or whatever else. That comes later, right? It comes as you earn it through the process. So you're going to get out of basic, you're going to get on a bus, and you're going to head over. This is where all the new stuff starts. Okay. So all the new stuff starts. You graduate basic with all your guys and gals. You got yourself a little group of people, and you're going to show up. You're going to show up over at what used to be called the Special Warfare Candidate Course, dorms and all this other stuff. And we're going to do the natural stuff we always do, which is in process, and get ready for the course. Now, this is where we start talking about how they changed the course a little bit. Remember, it used to be SWIC for 7 weeks, and then you would go into a separate ANS that was 4 weeks of assessment, 4 weeks of pre-dive, assessment selection, and then 4 weeks of pre-dive, right? So that got you to your 2 8-week courses. That is not going to happen now. You were going to show up for the first 3 weeks. So you're going to have your classic in processing, and it's usually about a week, I would assume, to get you ready to go. Somebody can call me out on that. Trent, do you know how much the in processing is?
I don't. And I'm sorry. I just want to go back. Can we start this with, I hope that we get a bunch of this wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're at the training wing right now and you want to correct us, please, because this is one of those things where we're not releasing information, and for reasons, and you might have fantastic reasons, but like, this is what we know right now, and we're not in the organization anymore. So like the level of know is less, right?
Mm-hmm. And we're driven to do this because the messaging is already out there and people got this wrong on Reddit. The reason why we're recording this is somebody sent me a message and they were like, yeah, this is what it is. And it's freaking people out. People posted memes on it. I even posted, I was like, that's not correct. Like we know enough to lay out the bones of this for you. Like, of course, some of the nuances we're going to mess up, or some of the more, timelines, or something that maybe has changed real recently. Of course, we're going to not talk specifically on that, but we're not telling you we're the subject matter experts. We're giving you the best information we possibly can because your message already got out and it's wrong. Yeah. You're already behind it.
A, if we're wrong, let us know. B, honestly, none of this really matters if you're a candidate and you actually prepared the right way. So if you want to stop listening right now and you're a candidate, just drop us a comment and say, like, I stopped listening and I'm just going to go back to getting after it. And I'll be like, yeah, that's awesome.
Best comment ever. Yeah, everybody I stopped listening because it doesn't matter. Perfect. All right, so the first 3 weeks here, basically. So they're going to split it up, and it's going to be 3 phases. Okay, so it's going to be the first 3 weeks. It's going to be like all of the intros that you complete, all the intros that you got to do. Like how is it that you show up to the pool? It's basically how to be a cone 101. Okay, it's phase 1, block 1. If for some reason, okay, and they're gonna ramp it up. It's not gonna be prep the entire time. It's gonna be, hey, we're gonna teach you a skill. We're gonna make sure you understand it. We're gonna let you, have your time to figure this skill out. The next day, though, if they tell you, hey, perform this skill and you perform it incorrectly, there's gonna be a penalty to that. They're going to start giving you penalties for these things because it's information that they gave you. They're building you up in this phase, right? So they're showing you all the things. You're doing all the intro in block 1.
Yeah, progressive penalties and everything that you learn, you are held to that standard from there on out. So just like everything else, get ready for the fire hose. It's a good time.
Yep. And so if you fail out or if you can't complete tasks in block 1 for whatever reason, there's a couple ways you can get injured. You could have a medical thing that's non-injury, right? You could just be sick and you can need to take some time out, whatever else. If you fail out or can't complete block 1, you'll basically go in to block 1 to recomplete. You're probably only going to get one shot at this though. Okay. So if you go back for the same reason, like if you can't complete a task, and then you continually fail that task and you are unable to progress inside of that block, then you may be asked to take a setback. If you do that again, you could be asked to leave. That is a very, very bland hypothetical. I don't know the process exactly, but that's what it's been in ATC for years.
Welcome to SOT Team 6.
SOT Team 6. Shout out to all the barracks lawyers. They know better than I do. That's not to say, like, if you hurt your ankle, and then you get rolled back to the next team. And then on the next team, like something crazy happens and you fail an event and it was just a crazy thing. Like, that's not technically, a lot of the instructors will be like, well, that's technically not your second time. You were hurt the first time. That's not the same thing 2 times in a row. So there's wiggle room. You can hit me in the comments if I'm wrong, instructor types, it's fine, but I was just giving a hypothetical. So that's going to ramp up all the way through week 3. Okay. So this is Cone 101. This is do what I tell you to do, get ready, because we're going to start stepping on the fire hose. Okay. So and to be clear, we didn't talk about SWIC because it ain't there. Okay. So that's the reason why. So don't hit me in the comments and be like, well, where's SWIC? We didn't talk about it because it's not there. We don't know. We haven't talked to anybody about what they're going to do with it. What are they going to do to the facilities, the coaches? How are they going to interact? I think I know. I bet I could probably put out a guess on how it is that they're going to run these separate teams, like the team that's rehabbing, the team that's ready to go, people that are out of training for extended periods of time. Maybe a course doesn't start right away. I could definitely, before the 3-week block 1, before you actually enter into the course, I could definitely see a space for them, but I'm not going to pontificate. I'll open it up to you, Trent. Do you know anything about what I just talked about? It's okay to say no, by the way. Please.
No, I haven't been retired long enough to want to like call people and get into the curriculum or anything like that. Like the structurally, this is a difficult thing to do for the paperwork side of the house. So for all you curriculum developers, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But also the new way that they're doing business is going to be much easier overall.
Right. Okay.
From that standpoint, sorry.
I agree. It was nerdy, but I agree. So that's to say, like, hey, you want to tell us what these, what's going to be going on? You want to tell me, what's happening and why? Man, come on the podcast. SWIC coaches, come on the podcast. Yeah. Flight soups, whoever, come on, open invite. We know we love you. We'll provide a safe space. So weeks 4 to 7. This is block 2, phase 2, whatever they're going to call it. They're going to call it something. Let's call it block 2. This is where we really start ramping up time, intensity, duration. You're going to be on your feet for extended periods of time. You're going to be doing way more things are going to be expected of you in the pool, out of the pool, all of this stuff. Okay. You are going to ramp up in block 2 to an area that you have not seen before. Okay. So the gloves are going to come off a little bit in block 2. And remember, this is week 4 through week 7 inside of block 2.
Yeah, like for an example, right? Like in the beginning, we're going to teach you how to, it's so nitnoid. We're such a community of isms that we're going to be like how to enter the water, how to mark your gear. And we're going to spend some time before y'all enter the water with a single splash. You know what I mean? Like that's an achievement right off the bat. And when you start to get to this point, it's like, okay, like you passed your initial fitness test to get in here. You've done all these other things that we know you can swim, but can you swim with a uniform on? Right. And can you buddy breathe? And can you like intro to like a lot of these other things? So like we're still probably doing intros here, but we're ramping up the intensity and trying to see, if you're going to be able to meet the next standard that comes along, because this is the problem is we only have so much time to get to where we need you to be before you go off to pre-dive or free fall or wherever you're going, SEER and airborne and your apprentice course and all that other stuff. And so like we're going to start to make some assessments on what your ability is for the next, few weeks to get to where we need you to be.
Right. So the other thing here that I'm going to hit, because it's a big ticket item and I want to spend a little bit of time on, is at the end of block 2, you're going to be expected to pass a PT test, an objective PT test.
Oh, no.
It is going to look like a 3-mile run, some deadlifts, pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, and a swim. I don't want to get into other than the 3-mile run, which was communicated to us directly. I don't want to get into the specifics about this test other than to let you know that this PT test is a good thing because it fixes a problem that everybody said. They took feedback, they looked and said, we need an objective standard to graduate from one course or another. And this is what happened. Okay. So first and foremost, I'm pretty for it. So I'm pretty excited about it. I could care less what the test is. Can we objectively evaluate it? That's what I care about. And it looks like this is a good thing here. The other thing that I want to say is, you may be able to swim. Can you swim with, uniform on? You may be able to ruck. Can you ruck after you've been on your feet for 10 hours and I wake you up to go on that ruck? This PT test is another one. The PT test, as it looks like right there, we're not putting out numbers for a reason. That's deliberate because, again, this stuff is going to change. You're getting it good enough. We'll give you the numbers in a different episode. You can go follow that one. However, can this PT test? Great. Oh yeah, it looks pretty simple. Can you do it after 7 weeks of getting your face kicked in, ramping up every single day that you go there? Can you go there after your team had a really bad day last week and you guys got absolutely destroyed and it was your own fault? That's the big deal. That's a big gate right there. And so I'll say it plainly, man, kudos to whoever, if the design is good and if it gets the data points that we need and gets the people we got, great. We'll figure that out later. But I'll tell you what, the initial look at this, kudos to whoever figured it out. Good job.
Yeah. So if you're practicing for this, maybe do like a really hard leg day, and then the next day when you're full of lactic acid, go try to run that PT test. Like that's kind of where we're at. We want to see how you're doing when you're sore, different environments, different time of day, all these other things. So this isn't like an unusual thing. This is how selection courses are run. Mm-hmm. Like we're not unique in this. We're unique in the amount of isms that we care about because we're the Air Force and we're psychotic.
Right. Focus on the process, not the product, baby. That's the way. That's the Air Force way.
But like the physical requirements and like the ramping up and the intensity is fairly normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it 100% is. It mirrors every other selection thing. Crawl, walk, run. We know it, right? It's all training. All right. So another thing that you're gonna that's new, that's going to be formalized, going to be a good thing, is you're going to start having a folder that follows you around everywhere. So from day one, as you get in, that digital folder is going to be cadre's input and subjective evaluations, professionally subjective evaluations of how it is that you're doing in those days. That's how we're going to assess those attributes. The attributes haven't changed. It's the same 9 attributes that we've been looking at. We've done lots of episodes on those. So until those change, they're still going to be grading you on those attributes, and it's going to be formalized in a folder. This folder is going to follow you all the way through it's going to have your medical information. I can tell you how you did, day 10 of assessment selection. I can also tell you how you did at free fall. There's going to be ways for people to add that in. So the data collection and then that folder following the student is also going to be something new. So good, bad, indifferent, it's all going in that folder, and that's going to give continuity so that when a new instructor looks, it goes, hey, wait a second, they're really having this person doesn't look like they're out for the team. They're not carrying the heat mitt gear. He looks back in your folder and goes, oh, wow. It's in here before. This guy never carries heat mitt gear and he doesn't do his teamwork like he's supposed to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark him down because I see that behavior and now it's a trend. So that's another way they're upholding the attributes based selection, is they want trend data on the way that you're presenting, not just like a snapshot. They want to look, hey, is this the right person the entire way out? With the intent, they're going to take that folder, hand it to your team sergeant, be like, here you go. Here's your pipeline. Here's what you got. Put them in the best place. Because like you were saying, Trent, we don't have enough time to have like the old school days of like putting pictures up on a wall and having a draft and talking about if a student, I want this guy on my team because he's got a funny face. I got a bunch of funny face guys on my team. You know what I mean? We don't have time for that. Now as a team chief, you can go, oh, tight. Yeah, you had really good jobs, really good jumper, really safe. Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, you're going to go over to the free fall troop. You're going to go over to the strike troop. Or maybe they look at it and go, wow, this guy needs a lot of work. I got my best leaders. You're going to go over to this global access troop over here, and you're going to cut your teeth a little bit more. So, I mean, that's another thing coming out of this. Good job. Kudos.
Well, one of the problems with the attributes, I think they were weighted a little too heavily before in the old ANS. And B, like if you're 18, you're probably stupid. And you need to give folks room to grow. Like one of the problems with the SMU guys coming down is like they're looking for finished products, like almost finished products, right? At least, from those attributes. You need to have all those attributes. Like we're taking people whose brains aren't formed yet, and we're trying to turn them into like decent operator human being types. So like if you see that progress, if you're like, hey, like this guy is carrying the heat mitt gear now. It's like, okay, we got through to him. Like we can, when we selected him in the beginning or when we passed him from that last block of instruction with reservations, like I think we did it. I think we're on the right track. And so like, I think that's super important instead of just being like, I kicked this dude in the teeth for 2 weeks, and he doesn't seem like a very good person. So
yeah,
adios.
Right. Well, Chief Nate Cox, he said it great. He's like, it's the buy versus the build method. Like, we're definitely building. We're buying raw materials here to build. The tier 1 units, they're buying a solidified operator. Like, they don't have a whole lot of input on what that person's going to do left or right. That person is solidified as a person, and you're buying that operator. Like, we're trying to build here, and this is another way that we're building, and that's how it should be.
Well, I will say that, and the build process doesn't end. It all the way through Tech Sergeant when someone else wants to buy that product. Or, late staff sergeant when the SEM wants to buy it. We're building all the way through there. Like, everybody has a hand in making these people who they're eventually going to be.
Right. And whether you get selected or not, the word on the street is that you're going to have these folders. Okay. So you'll be able to take that. Like, if you don't get selected, you're going to have reasons why. You're going to be able to look and see the inputs and see exactly what happened and go, oh, okay, well, tight. I understand why now. That's a big feedback item. So if you fail out, so you can do this for a couple different reasons. Failure to train. You can SIE. You could be rolled back. Right. We're gonna if you fail out, if you quit, the word that I am getting, and I'll continue to say that to make sure you understand that because we didn't have a whole lot of input from trusted sources that we would need to message this correctly, I'm going to say that I trust this person. I think that they're correct. If you get rolled out, if you quit, quitters are quitters. You do not get a second chance. That has been a problem that people have had down at ANS of, questioning, well, did they really quit, or what was the circumstance, whatever else. I think that there's more of a pendulum swing back to, hey, you said the words, it's time to go, right? Which is how it was way back in the day. That's number one. Number two, if you find yourself out of this, if you get injured, if you have some sort of rollback for some sort of performance issue, what have you, you're going to start at the beginning of block 4. Okay. So you have to get all the way through this block and enter into the third block, which is what we're going to talk about. It's your Hell Week. It's the big coup de grace, if you will. It's the big event at the end of this whole thing. I think I pronounced the wrong syllable there. The emphasis was off.
It was good.
So as you get there, if you roll out, you're going to go back. You're going to go back to week 4. You don't have to do block 1 over again. You got to do block 2 over again from the beginning. So choose wisely. The fastest way through this course remains the same. Just get through it. Don't go repeat a block. Graduate. It's the fastest way. And then Trent, that gets us into block 3. So block 3, after you pass that PT test, it's at the end of block 2. You're ready for block 3. Block 3, we're not going to talk about a whole lot. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's in there. It's called Hell Week. You can call it extended training day. You can stay up, no food. You imagine the worst that it possibly can be. This is where we're going to push you to your absolute breaking point and see who stands left.
Yeah. You better have a sense of humor.
You be right, because you're going to get humble. You're going to get humbled pretty quickly. So I'm not going to say how many hours this thing is long, because I don't know. I'm not going to say how it is this is going to be done. I can tell you from going through some of these training events and knowing the people that are working down there that are coming up with these training events, it is going to be everything that you've ever asked it for. So it doesn't matter if you call this Indoc 2.0 or if you call it SWIC-ass or if you call it some combined program. I don't know what you're going to call it. The branding's got to get there. All the branding that we heard, this is just feedback to you guys. It sucks. I don't know. You got to have an eye out for branding, because SWIC-ass ain't doing it. It's going to give you everything you asked out of this, and it's going to provide you with that confidence, number one, that reach back moment that we talk about always, number 2. And number 3, it's going to give the instructors a final look at you to be like, okay, cool. You were able to get some information in block 1, and you were able to get through block 1 without making me too upset at you. Great. You took that information, you applied it, we started ramping up the intensity, we started giving you more volume, and you were able to deal with that in block 2. And you even took a PT test to make sure that you were still physically capable. That makes me feel good. Okay, now let's see who you are as a person. Let's keep you up. Let's take away your food. Let's make you cold, wet, tired, hungry, and miserable. Let's put you with personality types that you don't necessarily like. Let's punch you in the face and see what you do. Because if you make it through that, man, that sounds like a teammate to me. And that sounds like somebody that's ready to ride the pipeline.
Yep. I mean, I love the way you said that. You're going to get everything that you wanted. And that's
you'll get everything you asked for. Everybody that's out, you're going to get everything you wanted, dog. You keep asking. You keep, I want it to be hard. I want it to be a challenge. 91% attrition rate. It hasn't changed. You're going to get everything you asked for.
Yeah. So you should be looking forward to it. As long as you attack the challenge and you don't quit, you have a pretty good shot. No. And I like the way that they're doing business. And even though like they're being a little cagey down there and we're not getting the direct information all the time and all that other stuff, I don't really care. I'm just excited. Because, if you go back and listen to the what we think ANS should be episode, the team fixes ANS, this is a lot of the stuff that we talked about. I'm psyched.
Yeah, I'm an idealist, man. I may be slightly bitter and cynical about a whole bunch of other things. I'm not bitter and cynical about this. I actually wish that there was more of a back and forth that we had. I want the core supervisor on. Ryan, come on, quit it. Go on the internet. I want people to come on and talk about the blood, sweat, and tears that they went through this to get it done at the highest level and how it almost failed. And now that it's good and they think that it's good, because I'll tell you what, that's how the instructors feel about it. These subject matter experts, these friends of ours that we know, that we've worked with, that live down there and live and breathe this thing and actually give a shit. They made it from the ground up. I know that they care about it. I know they want to talk about it. I know there's a platform that we can get them on.
We just need it. These dudes aren't doing this for they're not trying to win medals or do anything else like that. They want the best possible experience for the students. So the students are confident going into teams, and also that's the right people because they care about the cones and they care about the community, and that's all it's about. And so, dude, I got a lot of high hopes for what's coming. And I can't wait to hear more about it. Please, if we're wrong about anything, more than happy to hear about it. I'd love to get some more details. Not that it matters, because like we said, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Get out there and start working.
You got a correction? Do everybody a favor. Don't just send it to me on text and tell me how stupid I am. Put it in the comments. Correct what we said. Get the real information out there. That's the only point, right? This will help your messaging. Put it out there. Vet yourself. Say, hey, this is me. Here's the actual standard. You want to come on and talk about it? It's an open invite. Trent, thanks for sitting down. Everybody else out there, continue to train hard. Remember, it doesn't matter what we call the assessment selection course. If you're going to make it, you're going to make it. That's completely on you. It's not on anybody else. So hope we helped. Everybody else, we'll talk to you next time. Check out onesready.com. See ya.
Later.